The Jewish nation is perhaps one of the most well-known but misunderstood groups of people on the planet. I've talked about this long ago in the past, but it is certainly terribly confusing to many how the Jewish identity can be described as an ethnicity, religion, and a culture, although you may have noticed that many people use the phrase Jewish race, or many people in the United States describe their race as Jewish, and even in the past, on my annual demographic census for my channel audience, I distinguished Jews from any other group of people on the planet. But does this actually make any sense? Is there a such thing as the Jewish race? I've discussed this before rather briefly, but Jewish people are not a typical ethnic group, nor are they a typical religious group, as Judaism is more of an ethno-religious community, meaning that those born in the tribe are generally de facto members for life, even if they renounce the prevailing beliefs or traditions, which may sound odd, but countless other larger communities do this as well, especially Muslims, Mormons, or Catholics, a large chunk of whom may not have stepped into a religious institution in years, or even their entire life, yet still identify with the label they were born into. Now, the term Semite, most well known in the term anti-Semitism, the discrimination against or hatred of Jewish people, is actually not tied only with Jews, as the term originally referred to a collection of Afro-Asiatic peoples inhabiting the Middle East, including Arabs, Assyrians, Socotrans, and even many groups in Ethiopia and Eritrea who migrated from southern Arabia thousands of years ago. And historically, this also included the Phoenicians, Babylonians, and Samaritans, who actually still do exist, by the way. I've done an entire video on the Austro-Asiatic peoples and how they relate to one another, and it is rather odd to think that people groups like the Jews, Assyrians, or Arabs are related to Ethiopians, Somalis, or even those from northern Nigeria, but in the video I explained how the family spread to encompass such a vast geographic region, having been impacted by many groups around them. The oldest of the ancient Jewish kingdoms, Israel and Judah, were both located in the Levant in the southeast quadrant of the Mediterranean, and hence the original inhabitants would have initially been very similar to the surrounding Egyptians, Arabs, and Syrians in terms of genetics, although their customs and traditions would eventually make them very easily distinguishable. Some have argued that Judaism is de facto the world's oldest formalized religion, as before this, the vast majority of tribes on Earth simply passed down the fluid, pluralistic, animistic practices of nature worship and or ancestor veneration of their forefathers. And interestingly, one of the consequences of this was a sharp increase in the rates of endogamous marriages, meaning the vast majority of marriages were in group, quickly leading to a number of distinct genetic markers to be widespread among nearly the entire Jewish population due to genetic drift and isolation. The Jewish people were downtrodden by the Egyptians and Syrians, but by far the biggest impact on the Jewish nation was the conquest of the Romans, with the Jews being very resistant to the imposition of Roman laws and customs over that of the traditional Jewish religious laws, creating a series of revolts and rebellions. This led to the sacking of Jerusalem by the Romans, scattering the Jewish people, and the Roman province was renamed from Judea to Palestine after the neighboring Philistine tribe, with the Romans hoping that this would quickly extinguish the problem-causing Jewish nation from existence once and for all. The situation is extremely complicated by this diaspora event, which saw the expulsion of this formerly highly centralized endogamous ethno-religious community. So even though they saw a synthesis with many different cultures around the world, they still retained their original base. The bulk of Jews in the diaspora went to Europe, which is how they came to be the largest and most well-known group, but there were many other branches that went as far as China, India, Ethiopia, with certain tales even suggesting that some made it even further than that. When arriving in these different lands, such as Persia, Spain, Italy, or Morocco, There were moderate amounts of intermixing with the native peoples, with an especially high number of female converts marrying into the nation early on, but gradually they formed into tight-knit, exclusive communities that generally only married among themselves, and this is even more true after the spread of Christianity and Islam. So keep in mind, although the quintessential Abrahamic faith, Judaism, did not spread in the same manner as the other two major religions, which is why you have two Christians from Armenia and Portugal, or two Muslims from Senegal and Pakistan who wouldn't really have all too much in common. The Jews, even though those from highly disparate groups, generally have a much higher sense of community and camaraderie, and a lot of this has to do with the uniquely harsh nature of persecution and danger faced by the people worldwide throughout most of their history. There are many, many different Jewish ethnic clusters across the world, some of which I've discussed in the past, but the main three are the Ashkenazim, named after a biblical Jewish kingdom, who were mostly located in northern and eastern Europe as the result of countless expulsions and pogroms leading to a migration further into the heartland of Europe. The Sephardim, named after Spain, who were mostly located in Iberia. However, following the Inquisition, the bulk either converted to Catholicism, fled to North Africa or other parts of Europe, or fled to the New World, where the vast majority intermarried with the Latino population. And because of this, a significant proportion, some would estimate in the tens of millions of Latinos, have some significant degree of Sephardi Jewish heritage, as I discussed in an earlier video. And the last of the big three are the Mizrahim, meaning Easterners, referring to the Jewish community of the Middle East, such as in Persia, Arabia, and Egypt. So whenever someone talks about a Spanish Jew, or a German Jew, or Iraqi Jew, you can generally distinguish which larger community they are a part of, which has a large impact on their genetics and culture, even if they live in different countries or speak different languages. One of the genetic links that binds all of these Jewish peoples together is their paternal haplogroups, which, as I've discussed many times, although not perfect, is generally a pretty good indicator of shared heritage, and genetic studies on European, Middle Eastern, and North African Jews has shown that most share the same haplogroups originating in the Near East, including J1, J2, T, and E1B1, all typical of other Semitic populations. Others in the worldwide interconnected web of Jewish descendants include the Beta Israel, or Jews from Ethiopia, who are indeed genetically distinct from the surrounding Horn African population, although their actual Semitic Jewish ancestry in terms of DNA is much smaller than many other groups, and their paternal haplogroup distribution is also highly disparate when compared to the Ashkenazi, Sephardi, or Mizrahi, which points to an actual case of mass conversion to Judaism by a small founding population with limited genetic input from the Middle East. Horn Africans as a whole, however, are still related to Jews genetically through the migration of ancient and more recent Western Eurasian peoples, albeit with a Northeast African or Nilo-Saharan base related to the peoples of Sudan and East Africa. Other smallish Jewish populations around the globe include the Koshin Jews in the southern Indian state of Kerala, again a highly admixed population that by appearance alone certainly wouldn't stand out too much from the general Indian population, and similarly, there's a small Jewish community in Kaifeng in China that are partially descended from Persian Jews from centuries prior, and due to this they have largely assimilated into the local population, both from a genetic, linguistic, and cultural perspective, although there has been a bit of a cultural revival in recent years. Lastly, there is a moderately sized group in South Central Africa, mostly in Zimbabwe and South Africa, known as the Lemba, who by and large would appear indistinguishable from the other native Bantus of the region. However, they claim an ancient connection to the Middle East, similar to the Swahili. Genetic studies in recent years have shown a large degree of ancestry from the Middle East when compared to the surrounding Bantu populations, but whether this is specifically from the Jewish diaspora or from early Arab traders is currently unknown. And many Lemba have unofficially claimed Jewish status, although few have actually emigrated to the modern state of Israel. Speaking of which, Israel is unique in having essentially united a wildly diverse diaspora from all around the world, with the Jewish population of Israel coming from Germany, the USSR, Romania, Poland, Turkey, Iran, the Maghreb, Arab countries, Latin America, and has even attracted some from the United States, which has resulted in a religiously unified nation. However, in terms of ancestral, linguistic, and cultural background, is extremely diverse. There's a reason that Israel is often regarded as the USA of the Middle East, and it isn't just due to the external socio-political policies, but rather the diverse nature of settlement in the country. I actually find the situation in Israel to be quite intriguing, as the eccentric pattern of migration and intermixing in the modern state has resulted in a rather unconventional situation for the region, with the bulk of Israeli Jews being native born and a very high percentage, around 20 to 40%, having a mixed ancestry when it comes to the ethno-geographical origins of their Jewish ancestors, with Ashkenazi, Sephardi, and Mizrahi having extremely high rates of intermarriage, although the Beta Israel, Cochin Jews, and other more disparate groups still have a hard time in finding belonging and acceptance among the general population. In total, what we're seeing in modern Israel among the Jewish population is a fusion of these different groups, which will definitely have an interesting outcome in the future, with Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews having around 20 to 40% Semitic Jewish DNA, making many nearly identical to other European populations, while the Mizrahi have a much higher percentage, especially those around the Levant. Keep in mind, most of the surrounding Arab populations do have a bit of genetic divergence due to migrations from the Arabian Peninsula following the Islamic expansion of the 6th and 7th centuries, as well as the trans-Saharan slave trade, with the majority of Egyptians, Palestinians, Jordanians, and Lebanese Muslims having significant sub-Saharan African DNA from historic intermixing. So most Jews, especially the Ashkenazi, represent their own unique genetic cluster, somewhere in between that of Southern Europeans and Southwest Asians due to their endogamy and early cases of intermixing, although other Jewish groups may be more closely related to the surrounding populations. So to claim that there is an all-encompassing Jewish race is inaccurate, but there is a very obvious substratum or genetic base among most of the peoples of the Jewish diaspora, which explains the socio-political, cultural, genetic, and phenotypic similarities between them. So in conclusion, the Jewish nation is one of the most interesting on the planet, even though the modern state of Israel and its future is such a controversial subject, and despite being separated by generations of close gene pools and genetic drift, there are many connections to many different civilizations across the planet, making them, ironically, a very centralized yet dispersed group of people with one of the most interesting histories. So go ahead and let me know your thoughts on the Jewish people and nation, and for today's poll, let me know which Jewish macro-ethnic division is of the most interest to you. And as always, this has been Mason. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.